All right, hello and welcome everyone to the Baton Rouge.net user group meeting. So we're in the month of March. So I was thinking earlier, it was actually, because I know everybody loves to hear about COVID constantly, it was actually the last March meeting we had where we considered canceling it, but ended up having it anyway and never had another in-person meeting. And now here we are. A year later, we're streaming on Twitch now. So for everyone who made your way over here from YouTube, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for sticking with us. Thank you for Jeremy. He has put in a ton of work on our Twitch page as far as our layouts, as you can see, the about. So we're looking a little professional now. So not that crazy background that I've been having for the past couple of months on YouTube. So I want to thank him for that. So how's everyone doing out there tonight? Let's see, the chat's rolling. Just remember that you can also join us in Discord. Feel free to use the Twitch chat. Whenever our speaker starts, you can fire off your questions there. Jeremy and I will pick them up and relay them, accordingly without being rude and just, talking over him. Let's see, other than that, as I said, we are the Baton Rouge. Let's see, how about this? Baton Rouge, Homa, Thibodeau.net user group meeting. Is that better, Jeremy? Am I getting closer? So we're here monthly. Yeah, second Wednesday of every month. We try to present any kind of information that's really software development related. We skew towards the .NET Azure side, but we're open to all things JavaScript, as you'll see tonight. Our counterparts, our Baton Rouge SQL Server user group is actually meeting as well. They're going to use the Teams app, so be on the lookout for that. I'm pretty sure both sessions will actually be posted to our YouTube channel after they're done. So if you miss anything, hop on over there and make sure you check it out. We have our past sessions posted to that channel as well. So typically, we run through other events, but again, there's really not a whole lot going on in the area. Hopefully things will open up one day and we can do in-person meetings again. For now, we'll continue to stream monthly, the second Wednesday of every month, and here on our new home on Twitch. So be sure to follow, like, or whatever they do on this, and get updates on what we're doing. We also have our meetup page. That's the best way to keep in touch with us. You can message us, you can get updates as to when we're meeting and all of the rest of the info that we have. As usual, we are still looking for speakers. I think we have the next couple of months booked, but if you're interested in speaking, just let us know. We'll arrange something. We are open to any and all kinds of topics. We love for our local guys and gals to come on and speak, but if not, we will reach out and find other speakers elsewhere. For this one, we went all the way to Lafayette, so we're venturing outside our comfort zone a little bit. As always, you can find us Meetup, Discord, Twitch, YouTube. We should have all the links below for any additional information that you need. Let's see what else. I see some people in the chat are talking about the TEALS organization. That is a Microsoft initiative that looks for technical volunteers with a strong background in computer science and programming. They actually help bring computer science curriculums to high schools. We are talking with their regional rep. This is something they are bringing to Louisiana. So if you're interested in it, be sure to stay tuned. We have more information to distribute, and we're going to try to get the rep on next month to give us a rundown of how you can get involved. If you have any suggestions or anything like that, please let us know. We can get you headed down that path. So for tonight, we have all the way from Lafayette, Raymond Camden. He will be talking to us on embracing the Jamstack. In this talk, Raymond will introduce the Jamstack and definitely explain the name and give us some practical examples of where and how it can best be used. So Raymond, if you'd like to introduce yourself or tell us a little bit about what you're going to show.
Absolutely. And if it's okay, I'll go ahead and share my screen and go through
sounds perfect.
I have a PowerPoint with 98 slides, so I hope y'all are ready. No, not 98. Cool. Are y'all seeing my screen okay?
Yep, we see it.
Cool. All right. So, hi, I'm Ray Camden. As of next Monday, I am a developer evangelist for Adobe. I haven't actually said that anywhere publicly, and it's very egotistical of me to think that people would run to the hills and yell that. But if you can, let's keep it between us. Let's keep it a little kind of secret. My plan was to announce it Monday morning, my first day at work. Formerly, I was at here. We did a lot of technology involving location and mapping and things like that. But I'm very excited about my new role at Adobe. And if you ever go to my blog, you'll see I've been talking a bit about some of the PDF services that I'll be working on at Adobe. I tweet at Raymond Camden. I highly encourage you to follow me. I only tweet very important business enterprise stuff, nothing ever silly or cat involved at all, I promise. But I will say my DMs are open. And if you have any questions about what I'm sharing today, or about web development or JavaScript or cats or adoption or anything, my DMs are open. And a lot of times these questions turn into great blog posts. So you will not be bothering me if you ask me a question. In fact, I live for it. So just reach out when you can. So let's talk about the Jamstack. I've been in this industry for way too long. I'm ancient. I'm like 48 or so. I'm turning 48 in a month. So I've seen my share of terms. So yeah, Jamstack is absolutely yet another marketing term. And previously, and unfortunately, I keep forgetting that my slide deck capitalizes the header, but that's lowercase j. I'm sorry, lowercase am. Previously, it was known as uppercase Jamstack, where J and M were an acronym, and I'll talk a bit about what makes up those parts later. And before this, it was known as static sites or static site generators. So this is something that's going to been around for a while. Jamstack as a term is maybe a year or so old. And honestly, having seen the cloud become an accepted term, but still people complained about it. Seeing serverless become an accepted term and people still complained about it. Terms like this are useful for at least giving us like a groundwork in terms of what we're talking about. And hopefully I could do a good job tonight of kind of explaining what it means, certainly what it has meant for me and my development. The way that I define Jamstack, and it's the cardinal sin of presenting is to read from the slide, but I like this definition, so I'm actually going to do that. But to me, Jamstack is all about building site that rely on using pre-rendered dynamic content living in production as static assets that we enhance with client-side JavaScript, APIs, serverless, etc. Essentially, it's a way of having a dynamic system locally in development and a simpler static system in production. So I come to this from spending a long time with a older stack that worked well for me for 10, 15 or so years, where I always had Apache or IIS if I had to. I used Cold Fusion as an app server. If you've never heard of it, you could just mentally replace that bullet with classic ASP or PHP, same basic concept. I would use MySQL as well. Admittedly, in the old days of development, I used Microsoft Access because it was easy, and I have no shame in saying that. But I migrated to SQL Server and MySQL and real servers, along my development history. But this was my typical server. So if I was building anything at all, I would throw Apache at it. I would throw Cold Fusion at it. And I would throw MySQL or SQL Server, and all these parts would be what I would use to build a website. I will say Cold Fusion at the time wasn't free. There's a free open source clone of it now. I had the benefit of having free/cheap access to it, which kind of made it easy to use for me. In terms of why I did that is that it was very, very flexible. So I used Cold Fusion to build e-commerce sites, to build content sites, blogs, pretty much anything. And to be fair, PHP.net, it really is a platform to build anything at all. And for me, Cold Fusion was very, very powerful. Again, I could do anything. I knew that there was no request that could come in that I wouldn't be able to build with the app server of my choice. And what I discovered is that I ended up using Cold Fusion and MySQL to power these database-driven sites where the data changed once every 2 or 3 months, if that. And I would maybe get on some sites, let's say 1,000 hits a day or 1,000 hits a month or so. So I had a ridiculous amount of power driving a site that really did not need that kind of power. So I, many, many years ago, started hearing about static sites and static site generators. Over 10 years ago, the first static site generator was released. That was Jekyll in 2012 or so. It was a long time ago, but essentially what a static site generator gave us was basically a dynamic app server in development. So when I worked with a static site generator on my machine, it felt very much like Cold Fusion /PHP/.NET, whatever. I had a template language. I could reload and see things, and variables and loops and if conditions and things like that. That was in development. But what's cool is that I could take that and then just output static files. So as like an example of how that would work, I would take some Markdown, for example. I would then take some data, so a JSON file, YAML, or I can maybe write some JavaScript to even talk to a database. And my static site generator will take this and merge it into HTML, and I would deploy. And that was it. So what I discovered is that I could take this old stack, I could get rid of everything pretty much, and just add files, in production. So certainly on my development server, I may still have a database. I may still have multiple things going on. But when I was done, I was producing flat HTML files. So I looked at the stable of Cold Fusion site. I keep saying Cold Fusion, again, that could be PHP, whatever. But I looked at these sites where my data was changing pretty rarely. It was something that could be represented in a flat file type of format. And this one by one, I began converting all these sites to static. And I still had a way for me to update them. It was on my machine. I would do whatever I needed to and just deploy. And what I realized is that, oh my God, all of a sudden, I don't have to worry about production. If I am hosting flat files on Amazon S3 server, when S3 goes down, it makes CNN, right? And I know those people are a hell of a lot smarter than me. They'll get it up and running. Versus what I used to have, which is I'd manage a VPS. I'd manage my Apache. I would patch it. I would manage Cold Fusion. I would patch it. I would manage my database server. I would, kind of do all that just to, again, run a site that was getting 1,000 hits a month with data changing very rarely. All of that kind of went away. Now, I want to be clear that the Jamstack, this whole new stack, it isn't necessarily removing all of the complexity. And in fact, and sometimes it's moving the complexity. So for example, my blog right now is 100% static. But the setup for my blog is somewhat complex, but that complexity is all in development. In production, it's flat files. It's some API calls. It's all stuff that I don't think about for more than 2 seconds. I ran my blog on custom Cold Fusion code for 10 plus years or so. I switched to WordPress because I was just ready for a change. I had heard great things about WordPress. I changed to WordPress and it crashed within like an hour or so. And that was my fault. I didn't configure it right, but I just kind of assumed that WordPress would work out of the box. And once I kind of fought it and got it running, I was happy with it. But then I would have cases where I'd wake up Saturday morning and I discover, oh, my blog has been down for 9 hours because I dared to go to sleep, and WordPress just knew. It knew I was sleeping and decided to crash. So to me, this has just been, even when I have a lot of complexity on my local system, just knowing that out in production, things are a lot simpler tends to make me sleep better at night. So in terms of static site generators, there are a crap ton of them. Just like JavaScript frameworks, there's a new one every single day. There are a lot of these static site generators, especially as the Jamstack has gotten more and more popular. I am going to talk about one today, but I want to be absolutely clear. When it comes to static site generators, when I look at one and play with one, it's pretty much an immediate love or hate. There's like no in between. So if you don't like the one that I am showing today, but you're intrigued by the idea of what it does, please, please, please consider your options. And at the end, I can talk about some of the other ones I've used in the past. The one that I'm focusing on today, it's worked really, really well for me. But I have found that, for example, like on the client side, I am very, very enamored of Vue.js. Some people are more enamored of React. I can do the same things in React and Vue.js. I prefer Vue.js because it clicks more with me. This particular static site generator, it clicks with me. If it doesn't, just know that there are multiple different options out there that may click better with the way that you develop stuff. So that was a huge long preamble. I apologize for that. But the one that I'll be talking about today is eleventy. You can find eleventy at the easy to remember URL 11ty.io. And yes, I do have to Google that sometimes when I forget. This is an open source solution. Pretty much every single one out there is open source. This particular one is node-based. That was a big deal for me. Before that, I was using one that was Ruby-based. And you didn't have to know Ruby, but you had to install Ruby. I use Windows. Ruby on Windows is not ideal. I'm also using Windows Subsystem for Linux, which runs Ubuntu natively. It's real slick. And even with that, Ruby was a bit of a pain. Once I would get Ruby installed, the generator that I used worked fine, but it was always kind of a fearful thing to use. Knowing that eleventy was node-based and it didn't matter what operating system I was in, just made me feel a lot better. It also supports multiple different template languages, and you'll see an example of this. But when I talked about having an app server in development, having a template language where I could do conditionals and loops and stuff like that in development, eleventy supports a huge amount of them. Again, the previous generator that I used a language called Liquid, this one right here. And knowing that I could use it in eleventy was really, really nice. What's great, though, is that you can actually mix and match these if you want. So Liquid doesn't work great for very particular data manipulation type stuff. And on my blog, I had one particular web page that was a bit wonky. It was my stats page. I was doing a bunch of number crunching and stuff like that. So for that, I used EJS. EJS is a horrible, ugly language. I don't mean that as an attack. I don't like it at all. I guess that was contradictory. I don't mean it as an attack, but I don't like it. EJS reminds me a lot of classic ASP and older PHP. It's very, very flexible. It doesn't necessarily make a great looking language, but nice thing about eleventy, again, is that you have multiple different options of what you want to work with. Being node-based, it's really easy to install. So you just do a quick npmi-g at eleventy/eleventy. But using eleventy for almost a year, I still looked this up because I always forget to add the @eleventy part, and apparently there's a package already called eleventy, and I think they even output a message like, hey, if you met the static site generator, you probably want this instead. But this will give you a CLI called eleventy, which is really, really simple. It basically has one command, eleventy, that will take your site and output a static version of it, and you'll see some examples coming up. You can pass a couple of arguments, like what folder to look at and where to save the output. What I'm showing here are the defaults. So if you don't supply these, it will look in the current directory and it will output to a folder called _site. It also supports firing up a local web server to make it a bit easier for you to test. It will even do things like noticing when you change files and automatically reloading your browser for you. All right, so a quick example here. And I don't want to show you. So I have a folder, it's eleventy_1, and I have a markdown file, and that is the entirety of my directory. Just ignore the _site folder. I've already kind of tested this before, but literally like my entire site is one markdown file. So if I want to output that as HTML and not markdown, I will go into 11.1. I apologize, I got one of those new mechanical keyboards that is like extremely loud. I will do my best to type gently, but you can see there is my markdown. If I run 11, it's basically going to parse the markdown and output HTML. Not terribly exciting. If I run 11-serve, I'll see I get a URL. I get some output about how long it took, and we can open this at localhost 8080, and I messed up. Oh, I'm sorry. I called it README. There we go. All right. So yeah, that actually was a mistake I did on purpose. So one of the things that eleventy does is it looks at your file name. In this case, my file name was readme.md. And based on that, it outputs a file based on that name. And if I actually look at the file system, it made a folder called README and an index.html file underneath there. And if I go in here, I can see I have a /README. So eleventy has a default URL based on the file name that you can actually tweak on a case-by-case basis if you want more control. So at this point, if I actually go there and just add a few exclamation marks, save them markdown, go back to my browser and reload, you see it shows up. Yeah, again, technically this is just a markdown parser now. It's pretty boring. But let's kill this and go into 11.2, and I'm going to run the server here, and then I'll show you, kind of how I generated it. So we'll go back here, and this is at the root, I believe. Yep. All right. So I have an hello world, and I have this file was last updated right now. So how did I build this particular one? Go in there. I have one particular file. Oh, thank you, Visual Studio Code. This time I'm using Liquid. If you've never seen Liquid before, or perhaps any of the HTML templating type languages, it's basically a way to add variables and logic and things like that to a HTML file, basically. And what eleventy did in this case is it saw the variable token, in this case page.date, and eleventy supplies a page variable with a couple keys underneath it. In this case, date represents the time that the file was generated. So if I were to just randomly modify this, run it again, in theory, we'll see a different time from 1655 from, oh, okay, I'm sorry. It's keep forgetting, when the file was created. The file was not created again, just updated. But you do see my change to the markdown to the file. Let me add a couple more just to be sure. A couple more exclamation marks, and we see some more stuff. Okay, so far again, you're basically seeing a markdown processor. You're seeing a liquid processor, not terribly useful. But we begin to get a bit more exciting when we add a bit more power with layouts. So layouts will be specified in front matter, and this is a pretty standard thing in the Jamstack where we have a way to specify metadata for a page basically on top of the page. This is typically YAML, although it could be JSON or JavaScript, but YAML is the bit is typically what most people do. It's normally the simplest thing. In my front matter, I could say, hey, I want to use a layout file for this particular content that I'm writing. eleventy will automatically look for that layout in the includes part and can use any template language you want. So I can write in Markdown and build a fancy layout file in Liquid, in handlebars, or any other language of my choice. You can even do fancy chaining. So if I'm building a blog, for example, and I want to build a blog post layout, so I can standardize how a blog post look, I may still have a greater site layout that every single page on my site uses. If I want to do that level of chaining, I can do that. Now, I talked about front matter. This is an example of how it looks. YAML is easy until it's not. Typically, I find YAML to be a bit confusing when it gets to arrays and more complex data and stuff like that. But if you're doing a simple key value pair, in this case, for example, layout has a value of something, title has a value of a value, something has another value. I can specify any values I want to here, and it just becomes part of the metadata for that page. So let's look at an example of this. And once again, I'll kill my server, go to the next one. I'll show you it running and then show you the code behind it. And all I'm doing is eleventy serve. We'll go back to my demo page. And we can see a fancy, nice Bootstrap page that we've probably seen 1,000 times. I can go into this other page, Ray. Notice that it may be a little bit hard to see with the stream, but the active CSS class is changing based on me being on Ray, me being on home. So this feels very much like an app server type thing. Like I know the Cold Fusion code that I would do to handle that. But let's actually look at the code behind this. And let me do a little bit of cleanup. All right, and we'll go into 11.3. So my site consists of two markdown files, index.md and ray.md. And notice that I have my YAML code on top. This did not show up on the page. If you view source, if you would view source, you would not see this particular stuff up there. Ray.md is pretty simple. I was being totally silly when I did this. So the egotistical, etc. Testing, more testing. Again, this is all pretty standard markdown. 11D does now do the reloading for me, and I wasn't on the page, but let me change this again. The person who loves cats, save it, go back, and reloads automatically. One thing about the reload feature of 11D, it only works when you have a full HTML page. So if you're testing with, like no HTML tag, no head, no body, it won't reload. As soon as you have a real site layout, it begins to have that feature, which makes it a bit easier to work with. But the way that I did that layout, both files specified layout and then layout.liquid. 11D by default looks in the includes folder. And in there, I simply have layout.liquid. I took the code from Bootstrap site, basically just cut and paste it, but I was able to put some variables in there. So for example, title, notice that my layout file has title defined. This will create a default when a particular markdown file does not specify it. And the way that the content got in there was via a variable called content. So literally now, if I want to change from Bootstrap to something else, for example, I could just change it here and it would work just fine. And by the way, I apologize. Visual Studio Code does have great Liquid support. I am on a new machine. I haven't got Liquid support on here yet. but typically the color coding would be a heck of a lot better on here. Let me see if I can make that. Yeah, I'm not going to install anything right now, but if you're curious about how the page detection worked, here's an example of a condition in Liquid. And basically, I just look at the page.url variable. This is just one of the many things that eleventy provides out of the box. And basically, I'm saying, you know, if I'm on /, then I'm on home. And if I'm on Ray, then I'm not on the home page, I'm on that page instead. If you look at the output, actually go into the HTML here, you'll see it's just a flat file, and the active class is applied under Ray/index.html. So all of this, again, is 100% static in production. So as just, you know, working with Markdown, working with, you know, basic content, working with the template language, you've seen kind of the basics already. That could be handy, especially on simpler sites, but to make things a bit more real world, you have to start working with data. So eleventy provides multiple different ways for you to create variables that your site can use. So the first one is one that you've already seen, that front matter. So for example, I had a title variable in my front matter for the home page and for the Ray page. That was data. I could also create a file-based data set. So I can make a JSON file or a JS file and basically kind of hard code or create dynamic data from there. Once I do that, it can be applied to my site. I could also create things that are just for one file, just for one directory, or for the site as a whole. And by default, all of this is stored in a folder called _data that you can configure if you want. So as an example of this, and once again, I'm going to show you the result for eleventy serve. I'll show you the result and then show you the code behind it. So I have a page that lists my cats. You can imagine I'm a cat breeder, for example, and I want to have my website show the cats that I have up for adoption. You can see 4 cats here. You can also see in the footer, I have, hey, if you have questions, send me an email. So the way that that was created, I'll go on to 11.4. In my index.liquid file, I have a bit of logic where I iterate over every cat item in an array of cats. Inside this particular for loop, I can show images, I can show names. This is all coming from my database, from my data, I should say. And that thing at the bottom where I said, you know, how to contact me, that's also a variable. In this case, it's site.email. So by default, eleventy will look in a _data folder. I have 2 files here, a cats.json and a site.json. The site.json is literally just the name of the site and my email address. If I could add like don't spam me to my email address and save it, if I go back, you can see it updates automatically. So I'm only using that variable in one place, but obviously if I was using it at different places, it would be done everywhere. My cats are just an array. And if I get a new cat to adopt, I will call this cat, I already have Luna, Pig, Cracker, Sama, Elise. Elise, I'm spelling that wrong, female. And we will make her picture bigger. So basically I add that new cat, I go back and did not reload. Did I have a typo? I did, thank you Visual Studio Code. And actually, it's a good, before I save this, eleventy should have exposed it, and it did. Bad token. So you would get that feedback in your terminal as well. Go back and resave. Did you see? I did fix the error. Let me try it one more time. There we go. All right. So again, you know, if I didn't typo, and by the way, you know, again, I'm going to lie and say I did that on purpose. If you're noticing that I'm doing everything by hand and wondering, you know, how a non-technical person would handle that, You are absolutely right to wonder about that, and we'll talk a bit about that towards the end. As a developer, this type of system has always been great. Like I don't mind this at all. But there are absolutely things and solutions for non-developers to make this a bit easier. Again, let me kill this and show you another demo. 11d5, 11d serve, and npm I node fetch. Forgot to do that beforehand. And and get all the files. All right, run you again. And ooh, that's new. I've never seen it fail. Oh, I know what failed. Luckily, this is in one place. I could fix it. Don't look at the code yet. Let me get it running first, and then I'll show you the code. All right, so now it's running. Once again, we'll reload. All right, so make that a bit bigger. What you're looking at is an HTML file that shows a listing of the films of the Star Wars franchise. Not terribly up to date, but this is actually driven by an API. And the way that worked, the file that I told you not to look at, now I'm telling you to look at, once again, it's a file in my _data folder. It's called films.js, and I wrote a bit of node code to hit a remote API to get the data, in this case, an array of films. And I basically just returned that API result. And if we look at the file, I basically loop over every film and just show the title. And I should say that API returns a lot more data about each film. I could do more than just a title, but basically, this is quasi-dynamic. So if you're wondering, like, what happens when a new movie is released? Would my Jamstack site have it? No, it would not. However, there's a multitude of ways to handle that. So for example, in this case, I know films get released once a year. Star Wars films had a pretty good cadence for a while, not so much anymore. But my options would include doing things like having a scheduled rebuild, where I know that if I do this once a month or once a day, I will catch a new film when it's released. I could also do something where if I'm using a database of products, for example, I can make it such that when I release a new product, I run an automated call to update my site. So that way I don't have to do anything. I don't have to manually create a new build. I can essentially automate that entire process, and the production site has new information. If I have to have some data be both static and dynamic, that's also an option. I'm working on a site now where they release products rarely, once a month or so, but products have data within it that needs to be up to date. So for example, how many of a product has sold. So I actually did a combination where when the site is built, I use this particular feature. I fetch the products, and that's available to my eleventy site. When you hit a particular product page, I actually then use JavaScript on the client side to get the most up-to-date information about that particular product. So it's a combination of static and dynamic in production. Back to my slide deck. So there's a lot more that eleventy could do. I didn't want to make this an eleventy presentation. It was more of a Jamstack site, but it can do things like pagination. So that Star Wars film demo where I had just a simple list, I could have built a web page for every single Star Wars film where you would click, you would get more information about the film, and eleventy would handle creating every file necessary for every Star Wars film. I can also do things like tags where a blog is typically the example of that, where I write about cats and I write about dogs and I write about salamanders. And if I ever wanted to gather all the cat posts, all the dog posts, etc., I can use tags where I say, hey, this blog post is about cats. Then I can build a page that simply lists all of those cat posts or all the dog posts, etc. You can also get into the template engine if you need to modify how Liquid works or how Handlebar works. eleventy also has plugins for things like RSS, etc. So that is an extremely quick look at its XI generator. Now I will talk a bit more about bringing dynamic stuff back. I kind of talked about that with the example with products where I could get the number of units sold via client-side JavaScript. Let's dig a little bit deeper into that. So typically when we talk about dynamic stuff, we're talking about things like forms, comments on web pages, search engines, things of that like that. Calendar is another example as well. And what's happened is that there's been a whole slew of services that have kind of grown up around the Jamstack, around the static sites, etc., that provide a lot of these services for you. In terms of forms, for example, you can use Wufoo. Wufoo has been around for a long time, has a really nice form editing system. And they basically give you a iframe embed that you just drop into your HTML, and then you get a nice form with validation and processing and stuff like that. Google Docs supports form building, FormKeep, FormSpree, GetForm. These are all services that basically give you an endpoint. So I build a normal HTML form, I point it at the endpoint that they give me, and then they echo stuff back out. So as an example of this, let me go to, I've not been to this site in a while, JavaScript cookbook.com. Yeah, this is a site I built a long time ago that just never took off. I was trying to make a set of JavaScript examples, but this is a static site where you can say, show me examples of arrays. You go into a page and you see the results there. But I wanted a way for people to submit stuff. And actually, this is not a good example of that because I took the form off because I don't think people were using it. Let me instead show my blog and my contact form here. Okay, so this is a standard form. And all I'm doing on this page is pointing to a service that will take what I enter and basically email me the results. So back in the old days when I was using Cold Fusion, I would just write my own logic to handle the form inputs, do validation and send all that. Now instead, I simply use the service that will just take my crap and just email to me. And if I remember back on this slide, I mentioned FormKeep, FormSpree, GetForm. There's just a bunch of these, and they all have different prices. They all have different features. Some support image uploads and stuff like that. But what's nice is that at the end, you basically just have HTML. This is an example of the GetForm service where they gave me this long, ugly endpoint. But what's nice is that I build my form. I tell GetForm, hey, when you're done, send them back to, thank you.html. The end user never realizes that they're leaving a site. Now, you and me, we're developers. We notice things like that. If we view source to see how things work, we have dev tools open, we will see the request. But for the typical casual user, they enter a form, hit submit, and they end up on a thank you page on your site, and their contact, their form information shows up in an email, shows up in a database, shows up in Zapier, shows up in any number of things like Salesforce, stuff like that. That there are a crap ton of these services literally just there to take your forms and send them back. This makes me real happy. When I first started web development back in '94 or so, one of the first things that I did was write a lot of Perl CGI scripts, literally just to handle forms. The rest of my site would be static, so it's kind of like what was old is new again. But I'm happy that I don't have to write Perl scripts anymore to do this. In terms of comments, pretty much Discuss is it. Facebook comments are used someplace, but Facebook comments are scary in general. So yeah, and a lot of people are deciding on not using comments at all. I do have an example of more that you can look at, and I'll share the slide deck at the end. But as an example, if we go back to JavaScript Cookbook, where I do have Discuss enabled, I assume everyone has seen Discuss. This site was kind of a failure. Nobody commented on it, but I tried. But Discuss is pretty popular. One nice thing about Discuss and it being popular is that once you have like registered with Discuss on one site, it's pretty easy to use it someplace else as well. You're kind of already a known person. Discuss has multiple tiers in terms of how much you pay. They will give you, when you sign up, basically HTML that you could just copy and paste and just drop into your site, making it somewhat easy to use. This is an example of one that's actually on one of my eleventy sites where I actually added a bit of the liquid to it as well to make it dynamic. Search is kind of important. When I first migrated my blog to the Jamstack, I was really worried about this because I had over 6,000 blog entries. It was really important for me that I could actually search my blog and find stuff. There are some great options out there. Google Custom Search Engine. This is a service that Google provides where basically you say, hey, I want a search engine just on RaymondCamden.com. And they will give you, again, some HTML code that you drop in there, and they will handle your search for you, all via client-side JavaScript. And they will happily serve you a few ads as well. It's an easy system. It's something that you can get up and running in 5 minutes or so. Google does no search, so you get good results, but you get a lot of advertising as well. So that's something to keep in mind. Another solution is Lunar. This is a client-side solution, so it's not necessarily good for a large site because the browser has to essentially download an index. So a crunched up version of all your content that's applicable for searching. It could be useful on e-commerce sites. If you're selling 10, 20 products, you don't have a lot of content. You can also do things like client-side caching to keep that index on the browser so they don't lose it every time they leave your site. For small to medium sites, it's a great free open source solution that's entirely based in JavaScript. Oops. I somehow found the keyboard to go to the very end. I apologize, hold on. All right. And then the last one that I'll mention is Algolia. This is a server-based system where you send your data to Algolia. They create an index, and then you send search requests to them. So this is actually what I'm using on my site, and you can't really tell. So go to Raymond Camden, we'll go to search, and if I click the right word, I saw an S, I apologize. If I search for Vue.js, I hit search. What happened here is that JavaScript hit the Algolia server. Algolia has an index of all of my data, and it searched all 6,000 plus websites, and it found the ones that mentioned Vue.js. Algolia will even do things like, this particular article mentions Vue more, so therefore it's a better match, and I will surface that first. And if I don't like that, if I want to return things that are newer based on date, I can do that as well. So Algolia basically presents a Google-like experience where you have a lot more control over just how it works, how it renders, and just everything about it. They have a great free tier. I store all 6,000 plus of my blog entries on Algolia. I am right below the paid tier, but if you're looking at a blog of a couple thousand pages, you can definitely use Algolia for free. I'll also say they have great analytics as well. So every week I get an email that tells me, what people are searching for. also what they're searching for and can't be found. So I get that in my inbox, and it's just a great service overall. I definitely recommend it. In terms of other things to consider, calendars, there's great solutions for that. Google Calendar, again, has a embed that you can use, just like Google Forms as well. It's a bit ugly, in my opinion, but if you have non-technical people managing your calendar, you want that embedded on your website automatically so that when they add a new event, it just shows up. Google Calendar would be pretty easy to use. There are definitely people doing e-commerce. The site that I mentioned earlier, talking about products, I'm using Stripe, and that works fine. And basically, you know, any API out there, you can call from client-side JavaScript. So, you know, one of the reasons that we switched from, you know, static sites to Jamstack is that typically when I would give a presentation on static sites, I would say, yeah, it's static, but I can do X, I can do Y, I can do Z. And I think people got tired of saying that and kind of used Jamstack to kind of reset the expectation, is that, yeah, we're working with static files of production, but they're enhanced by things like JavaScript. And also, you know, with serverless, you can pretty much do anything out there. I'm about to talk about hosting, and a lot of the hosting providers now provide serverless along with static site hosting. So if you want to do hosting, you can still use Apache. You can still use IIS. You know, the end result of everything I showed today was still just HTML. So if I wanted to, I could fire up an FTP server. I can upload that copy of files to an Apache web server in production and just do it like that. If I want to, I can also use a platform as a service type solution. So IBM, Azure, etc. I can also use Amazon S3. I am using that for a couple sites. I forget which, and that's kind of a good thing. Like, I've never had to worry about it because, again, when S3 goes down, everybody in the world notices, and very smart engineers start working on focusing it. So these are kind of the non-Jamstack related solutions, but there are services out there that are catering to people who are working with these types of things. People like Vercel, Netlify. Azure has in beta a static site hosting service. Cloudflare, as of about 2 weeks ago, just released their system. Vercel is pretty nice. It's zero config, so it will recognize eleventy, for example. And when I use Vercel, it just knows, oh, this is eleventy. I know what to run to make eleventy output. It's output, and I know what folder it goes to. I'll just make it work. They provide free SSL. I don't know about you. I've done SSL by hand a couple of times. If I never do it again, I will be incredibly happy. They have CDNs that's just free and automatic. GitHub and GitLab integration, and they have a serverless system kind of baked into it, which makes it easier to use. And they have pricing information. They definitely have a free tier. I use it, and it seems fine in terms of what it supports out of the box in terms of throughput and amount of data, etc. Netlify also has FreeSL and a really good CNN, also has GitHub and GitLab integration. So for my blog, I commit a new blog post to my repository on GitHub. Netlify is notified, and Netlify fires off a new build. Also has serverless built in. It has form support built in. So the form that I showed on my blog, Netlify handles processing that and sending that to me via email. They have a basic authentication type system that you can use. It's okay. I find the docs to be a bit hard sometimes, but it's there. I'll say that. They have analytics baked in. I will literally show you my analytics in a minute so you can kind of see what it is. Just overall, like, Netlify to me is the gold standard. It's not perfect. There are definitely things I wish they would address, but when it comes to hosting the Jamstack, they're absolutely the company that I compare to when I'm testing things out. And again, I have a link to their pricing. For me, it seems totally fine, but I'm on the free tier. So as a demo, I will show you my Netlify dashboard, and you can see my sites here, and my bandwidth used, build minutes, etc. This is basically how long it's taken to do the builds for my sites. I will say my site with 6,000 posts, it takes a little while to build. You can see my last couple of deploys here. If we look at this, you can see it generated 6,200 files, and it took 6 minutes. I'm sorry, total time 17 minutes. So it's not instantaneous. I'm okay with that. The only time I'm not okay is when I do a new blog post and I see a typo, and then I'm like, oh God, a typo in 17 minutes. And in that time, I'll get like 5 page views. So it's not that big of a deal. Certainly, a lot of people will see quicker build times. I will say there are static site generators that are faster than eleventy, like Hugo, for example. I don't care for Hugo. Hugo is a great system that other people love. It wasn't a good fit for me. I'm okay losing the speed of Hugo to get the just the joy of using eleventy. I mentioned analytics. I will show you what they have. Pretty simple. You can see my page views over the last 30 days, unique visitors and stuff like that, even where they come from, and top pages and top resources not found. So this is all useful information. That's a lot of people hitting my contact page, but okay. The big issue with this, so this is not on their free tier. You do have to pay money for it, but the max time they provide is 30 days, period. You can't go past that. That kind of bugs me, and I wish they would address that. So I actually use Google Analytics and Netlify Analytics on my blog. I hit this page all the time because it's a heck of a lot easier to read than Google Analytics. But when I need to see my stats over time, over more than 30 days, I switch back. So that's that. I do have some resources. Basically, jamstack.org. That's the one I would go to, because from there you can get links for other presentations. There is a Slack that is popular for Jamstack people, and that you could join. I'm not a huge Slack person because I already have the attention span of a cat, so it kind of distracts me, but that's a decent Slack. It's pretty good to use. I will say real quick, myself and a fellow by the name of Brian Rinaldi, we are working on a book called The Jamstack Book that you could buy right now. It's done via Manning. Manning has a system called the MEEP. It's Manning Early Access Program, where basically you buy a beta version of the book. But as we release more chapters, you will get the update. So, what you get right now may have a couple typos in it, although typically they do fix all that. But you will get the updated version as new chapters are released. I believe of the 10 chapters, 5 are released. Yes, 5 of 10 chapters. I know more are coming very soon. I have 2 more that are done that should hopefully be out pretty soon. But cool thing is that you buy it now and the new version will just show up when it's ready. So if you buy this book, I could feed my children. That's not a guilt trip. I swear, definitely buy the book. And with that, I'm going to keep screen sharing, Brian, in case people have a question where I need to show something.
Definitely.
I don't need my face, but if you have questions, hit me.
So I think the first question we have is, is your examples available anywhere?
Yes. So these slides, I can't type into Twitch chat, but these particular slides, embracing the Jamstack, github.com/cfjedimaster/embracing-the-Jamstack. And if anybody needs this later, you could DM me. I will give it to you. And I'll say, like, if you want examples, so yeah, all my demos are also in here. My blog is on GitHub as well, if you want to see like a large scale Jamstack example.
Nice. Yes. Who have any other questions for Raymond before we start wrapping up? In the meantime, I again want to thank you so much for doing this for us. We really appreciate it. Yes, we got that. I didn't click the button to have it show up on the screen. I apologize. But yeah, I want to thank you so much for doing this for us. We always appreciate you coming talk. If for those of you who don't know, Raymond's actually come to our in-person meetings before and spoke to us. Oh, let's see, we have something else. Oh, so I missed it. Let's see, what's the build time for the 6K blog post?
Yeah, so I'm still screen sharing. I will show you back on Netlify. So on Netlify, like when I do a full production build, let me do here. You can see times here. So 17 minutes, 6 minutes, 18 minutes, 20 minutes. I would say roughly average 12 to 15 minutes. When I work on my system, I tell eleventy to ignore 20 of my 20 years or so. So I've been blogging since 2003. Locally in development, I don't need to see those posts from 2003. So I'll show you how that works real quick. This is my blog, and yeah, look, so it's for eleventy, it's .eleventy ignore, and I just pass some globs to tell it to ignore, basically everything in 2000 and everything in 2010.
All right, good deal. Have any other questions, comments? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I have no easy answer for you. I can tell you what I did. It was painful and it hurt. But so I started with custom blogware. So all of my blog posts were in a database. So I used, I forget how WordPress wanted it. So it was mainly me being concerned about the size of the repo. GitHub can handle that, I guess, but it felt wrong. So typically on like a regular site that's not huge like mine, it would just be in my folder. I'd add /images, /CSS, /JavaScript. eleventy is a bit weird in that for files it doesn't recognize, like recognizes liquid, it recognizes markdown. For files it doesn't recognize as a security thing, it won't copy them to the output. It wants you to be very explicit. So I tell eleventy in the config file, copy CSS/star, copy JavaScript/star. And once I do that once, like that's it. So hopefully that made sense.
I was muted. Yeah, no, that's great. No, I'm just joking. I was messing with them. Yeah, no, I know. I was giving them a hard time. So cool. I think that was the last question. So, cool. I mean, if we, oh, excuse me. So if we don't have anything else, again, we'll do this the right way this time. Thank you so much again, Raymond, for coming out. I also thank you to everybody who tuned in and watched and came this way for us to our Twitch channel. I think it's been, for me, it's been a much better experience. I hope it's been that way for y'all. I guess the only complaint I have is I see everybody's Twitch handles now, except instead of their name. Some of them, fortunately, I know. Some of them I don't. So shout out to the people who I think are in the audience. Jeremy Cronin, always for sending out our user group newsletters. keeping the website up to date. I really appreciate that. Andy, who is providing feedback and helping me organize some stuff. Oh, there's Jeremy. I know she's out there too. She's been a great help. Of course, Jeremy Knight, who turned the stream off on me, and I lost some of my airtime. So now I'm going to have to stream on my own to try to figure out how to get that back. And obviously our speaker, who honestly, he is kind of my on-demand speaker. Whenever I have a month free that I need to fill, he's my go-to. So I don't know if he knew that, but I always thank you so much for coming out or staying in, or
Thank you for inviting me. I definitely appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah. Now, hey. So once we get our sub button, the first thing we'll purchase is an Elgato Stream Deck for Jeremy. The next thing we'll purchase is a new PC, because apparently it can't handle a Skype call. So anyway, that's I like to see people laughing, but you can't do that now. Maybe one day we'll be in person again. Probably not. We'll see. Yeah. Well, yeah, we're a little bit more regional now than we were before, so we'll figure that part out. Everybody. But until then, everybody stay safe. Any parting words, Raymond?
No, just thank you for having me, and yeah, be safe out there.
All right, Jeremy, you got anything? Yeah, I hope everybody didn't miss Ignite completely. It was okay stuff. They had stuff, but it's not as fun as Build. So we'll try to keep y'all up to date on the things coming up. Again, thank y'all for tuning in. We'll be back next month. Stacy Vickner will be our speaker. Some of you out there may know him. He's a local guy. I can't remember what he's speaking on. We're going back and forth on the topic, but we'll announce it as soon as we get it nailed down. So until then, I appreciate it.